Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is the Aspen City Council work session for February 5th, 2024. We have two items on our agenda this evening. One, we're having a meeting with the Wheeler Advisory Board, and the second will be a discussion around the Aspen Public House lease and possible modifications. And we'll start with the Wheeler Advisory Board. Kind of an open discussion. Chip and I will kind of work together to kind of get as much productive work as we can out of what we have in front of us from the memo that we've received. There are a number of questions, but more than anything, really just want to check in with the board and answer any questions of us and provide any direction that may be needed at this time. Chip, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe other board members?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited to be here. I'm Chip Fuller. I've been on the board for, I think, around 10 years. And I'll let everyone else introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Amy Mountjoy. I'm the vice chair.
How many years have you been on the board?
I think around 8 or 9.
I'm Tom Kurt, the secretary, and this is my 5th term on the Wheeler board.
Wow. I'm Nina Gabbianelli, 7th year, I want to say, on the board.
Ziska Childs, and I believe Nina and I started at the same time, so we're both going into our 7th year.
I'm Kate Lanick. I'm the representative from the Aspen Music Festival and School.
I'm Daniel Benevit, and this is my 3rd year.
Lauren Foreman, also 3rd year.
In the bylaws that I was just looking at, it says that the board is comprised of 7 to 9 members. I see 8. That language is a little weird, 7 to 9.
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa Rigsby-Peterson, the executive director of the Wheeler. We have one alternate. We have 7 board members, 1 alternate. Lauren is our alternate. Kate is our Aspen Music Festival and School designee. She's an ex officio member of the board, but the council has appointed 7 members to the board.
Also, Richard's out.
Oh, sorry. You see 6 of the 7. We're missing Richard Setner. Thank you, Chip.
Okay, so we are at 7 with an alternate and an ex officio. And we don't go to 9? Is that language just dated and?
I believe that the ordinance, there are two documents. One is the ordinance from 2021. I believe in the 2021 ordinance, it specifies 7 members. The bylaws, pardon me, which are meant to be uniform across other boards and commissions for the city, say 7 to 9. So we would need to align both of those numbers, but I do believe the ordinance says 7 members. So we have 7 full members, plus 1 alternate, plus 1 music festival and school representative. So there are 9 total.
Got it. Thank you. So it's a 7-member board with alternate and ex officio. Okay, thanks. Chip, did you want to start off by asking any questions, making any statements, or the
Sure.
like?
I'll just make a couple of brief comments. I want to start by recognizing Lisa and the outstanding Wheeler Opera House staff and management. It's a very experienced and productive team, and we're lucky to have such a high-quality group of individuals at every level of the organization. I've been to the Wheeler a lot this winter. I've been to magic shows, rock music, hip-hop, family events, films, comedy, and speakers. I've been impressed by the wide range of programming, stuff we usually don't have access to in this small town. I think there's also room to improve and grow. And as a board, we're excited to talk about this list of 6 topics we proposed and any other items that you want to discuss. And I'll read the topics. We want to talk about City Council's view of the role of the Wheeler Advisory Board and Council's expectations of the board. What is the board doing right and what's the board doing wrong? Thoughts on the direction and variety of Wheeler programming. What do we use to measure success, and is the subsidy level appropriate? Thoughts on the Wheeler's role in the arts community. What does the Wheeler mean to this community? Thoughts on the Wheeler's priority in regard to the real estate transfer tax, and should the Wheeler first concept be codified more formally? Thoughts on Wheeler staffing. Is Wheeler staffed appropriately, and where does that staff live? Are there opportunities to help Wheeler staff with housing? And thoughts on the Wheeler parcel lot, the empty lot next door? What should or shouldn't be done with it, and when? So those are the items. Happy to open it up to discussion.
All right, so we'll just go through these as best we can, and we'll keep it open for just discussion as well. Question number one is City Council view of the role of the Wheeler Advisory Board and Council's expectations. Are we all versed in the Wheeler Advisory Board's role and responsibilities? And so I'm going to put that question back to members of the board in the sense that, number one, are you aware of the roles and responsibilities and what you are charged with? And number two, do you think that that's appropriate? And three, are you fulfilling it?
Anybody
So
want to chime in? Thoughts?
how about let's start with a nod of heads. Who knows the roles and responsibilities of the Wheeler Board? Have you guys all read, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It is somewhat limited in scope. However, the language around it is pretty broad. When it talks about things like the daily and long-term operations, it's pretty broad. We seem to often delve into specific questions around programming, staffing has come up. There's been some technical requests in the past that deal with the actual building itself. And then, of course, there's the historic asset that it is. So I see the Wheeler Board is really overseeing a lot, even though somewhat limited by the ordinance that enacted this board. With that being said, so does anybody have any input? Do you want to speak to, we agree we know the roles and responsibilities. Are we doing them, and are they appropriate?
Well,
I
we're
guess I
certainly,
would like to know if it's perceived that we're fulfilling them at all. I mean, I know that's one of the questions that's down later on our list of topics, but yeah, we'd like to know. That's one of the reasons that we were happy about this, is to be able to come to you and say, do you think that we're fulfilling those roles appropriately? And if not so, what direction should we go, or which topic should we be focusing more upon?
Nina, did you have a couple of?
well, I was just going to say, I mean, we think we're doing what we are charged with, but we want to make sure, I think that's what our conversation, same point is. We just want to make sure that you're comfortable with what we're doing and we're doing what you need and expect,
Okay,
was really our main point today, I think.
okay.
And this also especially deals with the change of the RET, where with the passage, we now have the arts grants, and what the role is really with that and the change.
Okay. Sam?
Yeah, I just want to jump right in and let you all know, you're all experts in your field. You're all wonderful community members, and this is a great board to have. The Wheeler, I'm just going to speak from my perception versus maybe reality, because I do feel a little disconnected from the Wheeler because I do not attend that many events. I want to start on the outside. Aesthetically, it's beautiful. The work that was done was amazing, so I think if you were all responsible for that, that is perfection, and hopefully it stays that way. On the inside, I do wonder, I don't know if it's just me or some of the events that go on there just don't appeal to me, or generationally, I have no idea. And one measuring stick that I thought would be useful for you guys, and I don't know this information, is how many sold-out shows you have. Because the few Wheeler things I have gone to have not been sold out, and if I were to sit in your shoes and look at shows and events that go on there and none of them are sold out, I think that'd be pretty eye-opening to me that we're not attracting big numbers, because I would compare myself to the peers in town like Belly Up, Theater Aspen, and others that are selling out shows. And that brings me to my second point of hopefully being able to partner with them. I know there's some politics going on, but I remember going down to Theater Aspen recently and watching a two-man firefighting show with William H. Macy and his wife, Felicity Huffman, and that had no props but like 2 chairs and a stage, and I was just like, I like that theater, but it'd be cool if the Wheeler did something like that, because the interior of the Wheeler is incredible. So trying to do more events with like a Theater Aspen or something. I know there are restrictions because of the space behind the Wheeler, but I know these like commie shows, these concerts, these other things, I think we could get some bigger names. And I know we worked over here to up funding so that you guys can bring in some more expensive names. And then just like some last little thoughts I had. One of them is, you know, I always think stealing ideas is probably a good one. The Aspen Art Museum does those like apres up top, and those are always like the greatest hit ever. And I think the reception at the Wheeler is one of the coolest spots in town. And I really wonder if that can be utilized more for like an apres or something like that to really bring the community together. Because God knows after I'm done skiing, if they were doing something at the reception of the Wheeler, I think that would be like the coolest thing ever to go up there because the view is incredible and the aesthetic is amazing. And then lastly, I'm gonna regret saying this, but I do kind of wonder if when we get into election season, whether things like city council and mayor debates should be done in the Wheeler. I think I would be sweating bullets looking out there, but at the same time, like, this is a community venue, and I think there's things like that that could potentially be done. Otherwise, once again, I'm talking from my perception. I think you guys all do a great job and have like your heart completely in the right place. But I think to hammer it home, the sold-out shows would be my measuring stick of success. You don't need to sell all of them, just I think there's a certain amount that would tell you that you're attracting the right crowd and making the place popular on the inside.
All right, thanks. Ward?
Thank you all for being here. You know, as far as a role to recommend and advise, it's hard for me to say if you are doing your duty, if what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, because we have such limited communications with the board. I don't remember seeing memos from the Wheeler board as far as you know, what you're recommending, what your advice is. I remember seeing a more in-depth email from Amy a few months ago, giving us an idea of what's going on. So it's difficult for me to say what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. I attend events at the Wheeler. I love it, and I know there are a lot of events. And I don't want to get into the programming. I don't want to tell you how to do it, but I would like to know what you guys are feeling. If you think that it should be more utilized, if you think all of these questions, what your feedback is the subsidy level appropriate? The mix of programming, is that appropriate? Are we having enough dark nights? Is staff getting burned out? All of those things that are important for keeping a staff engaged and retained. And I think that's really important for everything in town, but, you know, so that's within your purview. So any kind of feedback that you can give us is beneficial to me because I really haven't seen any. I know the comments that we've gotten from Zizka and Nina on the last board interviews, and I want to address that while we're discussing this, but just to be better informed and have a better line of communications between the Wheeler board and the city council. I know you've got a big piggy bank and a lot of stuff that you can do, and I appreciate the programming. Not everything is for me, but I think next time I'll be there is on the 17th for Dance Aspen, and I really applaud the what is it, Paradise Paradox or Paradox Paradise. I thought that was a really good community discussion, and it's been replicated or repeated around the state in different states as well. So any of those community-centric events I would really encourage, but as far as question number one, I would just look for better lines of communication between the Wheeler board and the city council.
Thank you. Do you have any input at this one?
I guess I'd just like to say I've been to dozens and dozens of memorable experiences at the Wheeler Opera House, from ski films to live music to community events to, way back in the day, John Bush's film series, very memorable. I understand the difficulties that the Wheelers faced with the COVID restrictions and rebuilding the programming after that, and difficulty in finding employees and so on. I think you guys do an amazing job. And having just been to Crested Butte last week, again, just reaffirms how spoiled we are here. Nobody has a space like the Wheeler Opera House. Nobody. I appreciate the open dialogue, and I think you guys do a fantastic job. The longevity of the board, I think, is a testament to that. You guys care. Thanks.
Thanks, John. As I look at the powers and duties that are outlined in the ordinance, you are supposed to recommend scheduling policies, priorities, and rates for the theater operations, and recommend operating policy and rental rates for the commercial space in the Opera House building. I believe you guys are doing it. I agree with Ward, and this is something that maybe we'll need some assistance from Diane in, but you know, I've been asking for more communication from the chair, and I think you guys take care of business at your meetings, but then you also have constructive conversations around other topics that may not either be on your agenda or in the direct line of fire of your roles and responsibilities. And I've been asking to I want to hear that stuff. And we've been working towards it, and it's not any fault of Chip's that we're not getting that. But I think that process of communicating from the board to city council could be enhanced. Diane is taking a seat, so she might have some input in this.
Mayor, that was done in the past. It's not a normal practice, basically because you're in some ways circumventing the public process through that. But if you would like the Wheeler Board to put together a high-level communication, it would need to be things that the board had consensus upon. And I know that you all received kind of some communications earlier this year that might not have reflected full board consensus. So that would be something that you technically can request of the board if they're willing to put in the time, the extra time.
You know, and it could probably take a couple of different shapes. It doesn't necessarily need to be a missive just from the chair who recaps the summary of the meeting notes that we're going to get in. It could just be presentation of those notes. Or it could even be just the open door policy to let you know that it's safe to come to us with other items. Mm-hmm. And it's safe to send us an email about other items and the like. There are meeting notes that are available to us from the Wheeler Board meetings. And that's what I'm saying is, like, you know, my experience over the years has been that those are good, but they don't capture the other things that are going on, the other comments, the other undercurrents and stuff. And it would be great for us to have more of a flavor of that. And the reason that probably I say that is because what we've seen over the last year, whether it was the board interviews that we had, an email that we received, and the like, it seems that these things are bubbling up, and without a proper vent for them, they blow the top of the volcano instead of just seeping out. So I'm interested in better communication, whatever form that takes.
Got one more, and this one might maybe even more helpful, would be that the board can ask the executive director to submit an info-only memo. Right, so if there's a topic of, hey, we really want to get feedback from the city council on this, or we'd really like to see if the city council wants to schedule a work session on this narrow topic, they can absolutely request that happens, or they can even request through Lisa that to check in to see if council might want to have work session on a particular item.
If I can jump in here, I think consensus is good, and to have a report of consensus item is good, but counterpoint on split decisions, I think, is also very valuable. There are times when, the Supreme Court will have a dissenting opinion. You can get more out of that than you can out of the decision, or you can see the thought processes and the analytics that were behind the discussion. So I would welcome split decision coverage as well.
Chip, does that make sense between you and I?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that, and I speak for the whole group, I think we feel the same way. We'd like to be able to communicate with city council more and better. So we're up to any sort of direction on how to do that.
Okay.
I think a couple of years ago, Tori and I both were attending meetings, and I think those are meetings that are open to the public, so anybody that's interested can join in. And as Tori was saying, that, you know, you don't get a real feel for what's going on just from the minutes, but to be there and to see, if you're in person or if you're online, to be able to hear the discussions, I think is really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, we typically, in our meetings, we have an executive director presentation, we cover whatever we have on the agenda, but we always have a discussion part of the meeting, and that does go in all sorts of directions. And not a lot of those, not often those directions don't get voted on or come to a consensus, but if there's a mechanism for us to share that with you better that's outside of the meeting minutes, we're all for it.
Great. We'll continue to work on that. Look into that. Dr. Tom?
I'd like to comment because as a five-term member in about 15 years, I've seen over time, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through the Aspen Film, now owning ISIS and scheduling events there that might be too small relatively to fill up the Wheeler. Instead, they schedule some of their smaller events now at the ISIS. So I've gone from the days of seeing, just as COVID started, Paula Poundstone was scheduled there with us, all the total sellout, to being closed as we were in the first days of COVID. And now in returning, remember, they're not just Wheeler Showtix events, there are school graduations that are scheduled there. Recently we had a Sean Brook there in a kind of a leadership program in which I think there were 350 school children there one afternoon, for which there was no admission being charged. So the Wheeler gets involved in events where you're not necessarily looking for attendance at sold tickets.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then we'll get to that in the next one. Just to finish off question number one, what is the board doing right and what is the board doing wrong? I think the board is doing a lot of right. The only wrong that I might bring up over the last little bit is about this communication piece. You know, I think that I think that there might have been some frustration amongst board members who feel like their voice isn't being heard, or perhaps their desires aren't being followed, and it leads to poor communication. I don't need to use any specific examples. I think we all know kind of how that manifests itself. So going forward, I would say that if we clean up some of the communication issues, everything else should fall in line. I mean, you guys are doing a great job. You bring to this position and this institution as much heartfelt energy as anybody, right? With that, it also brings along those other emotions, protectiveness, disappointment and frustration, you know, when it's not perfect. So I think that a lot of that can be allayed is if we have a little bit better open communication so that some of these things don't build up and that they are being handled, you are being listened to, you are an advisory board that really, we step back. You know, we let you guys work with our staff leadership. We know you represent the community, so we really step back. So again, on that number one question, if any of you have, if you feel like the board is not being productive in a certain area, share it, either now or later, but share it, because that's what we're trying to fix. Sounds like communication is a big step forward for all of us. I'm going to move to question number two. We're going to go through this kind of quickly. There's plenty of time for anybody to say whatever you want. We can come back to anything at any time. Thoughts on direction and variety of Wheeler programming. What do we use to measure success, and is the subsidy level appropriate? So I want to tee this one up because, as Dr. Kurt just said, we just came out of COVID. So things that were running well and going on as business as normal at the Wheeler were completely interrupted for really 3 years. We're still coming out of that. You heard Sam talk about programming, the lobby use, and possibly more community uses such as election time debates and things like that. Last year, we all had a meeting and we all agreed that we wanted to see bigger, better. That was kind of the missing piece. I think we all felt like there was a lot of community going on. We felt like the arrangement between us and the music school is a set in stone relationship that we do our best to not only honor but move forward with. I think over the last year or two were the first times that we've actually slot programmed in the summer when it was available. Previous to that, it was just not available. So as far as programming goes, and I think those messages and that conversation that we had was heard. I think that we are seeing Lisa, who, again, go back a couple years, we hired an outside firm to do our booking for us. So Lisa, and I don't know how many of you have been in the booking, it's often called talent buying. I don't know how many of you have been in the talent buying business, but I have. And it's difficult. It's an art and a science and psychiatry all rolled into one. And it's not easy, especially in a remote area like this. So I think that the overall messaging that we as a council are saying is that we want to support that diverse programming. Yes, we want bigger and better acts, but we're also cognizant of subsidy level. What do we use to measure success? Sam was saying that he wanted to see more information about sold out shows and that in some way is an indicator for him about what the popularity or success of the bookings is. In our memo, it directly states that that is not necessarily the only metric that is being used for this. Because of the diversity of programming, it allows for the fact that in a town of 7,000 people and a valley of about 20,000 people, it's just not that easy to sell out 450 seats for every event. We will get some information from Lisa in the coming month, too, about what our Christmas season and this winter looked like to show us what was popular, what wasn't popular, and what lessons are learned there. So for us at the council, we've shared our kind of thoughts about programming, and you've heard some of it tonight. So I want to just bounce it back to you guys. Does that reflect what the board talks about? Yes, we want the bigger shows, but yes, we still honor the diversity and the community basis that the Wheeler Opera House does perform.
Yes, we do have those discussions, and yes, that's pretty much what we come down to. We're very excited about the new directions that Lisa has taken and brought new audiences into the Wheeler, which we're all very supportive of. And in reaching those audiences, yeah, you might not sell them out right away. And next year, when you reach out to the same people, hopefully they will have told all their friends that, hey, we went to the Wheeler for the first time for this kind of a thing, and you should go too. That's, what we hope for in growing, that Lisa will look at in growing things. Yes, we all hope that they sell out, but yes, we think that a lot of these new and different things are worthy and valuable to the community to have available. Yeah, I'd love to see it sold out all the time. That means people are engaged and excited and have faith that even if they don't know what the show is, if it says Wheeler, that you should go. So yeah, we all hope for that. I love the big exciting shows, we all do, but you can't do those every single day. Not everybody's on tour every single moment that it's available, but yeah.
I think it's well explained, Amy. That's great. I agree with that. I used to, when my first 5 years on the board, my metric was butts in seats, how many tickets are sold. I want as many sellouts as possible. And I have changed my stance on that. I still believe that. I still want to see a lot of sellouts. I absolutely want to see, every year I want to see more bigger acts. I want to see a a surprise that that everyone's talking about in town that they can't believe is playing at the Wheeler. I think that does require additional subsidy for that. But I also think that we need a diverse programming. We want to reach everyone. For example, if you look at the Belly Up, most of the shows that are sold out, I have no interest in seeing. I would like to, along with the goal of selling out shows and having seats full, I also like the idea of reaching every single person in this community and having every single person in this community go to the Wheeler for at least something. And those are kind of two different goals, but I think somewhere in the middle is where we want to be. So that's my thoughts.
Has the board had any conversations about lobby activation? A couple years ago, it was not heavy, but heavier on lobby activation. Sam brings up a suggestion more about lobby use and just activating the bar area. It doesn't necessarily need to be for shows. It could even just be a beautiful place to meet up and enjoy. Has the board had that conversation at all?
Yes.
Yes. And Nina, involved with David Dyer, has done performances there. She might want to comment.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we continue to revisit, especially summertime usage. We did do a consensual improv show there last summer? August? Okay. So it is, I mean, when the remodel was done in 2017, I think, for that lobby space, and the idea was to create a performance space. I don't think it ended up being as well done at that time. The lighting isn't really perfect. There's not really sound. It's difficult. It's a challenge. But there are acts that can work in that space. And so it's certainly something that I know I keep bringing up. So, because I think it's it's an intimate, it's a space that we don't have that size of venue in town. So it's, certainly something that is, again, we're regrowing after COVID, trying to get more, not only more people back into the theater, but also getting the theater staffed and having the right people in place for the positions to manage something like that. And then, running the bar and the concession is something that we just got the concessioner on board recently. So, that's a whole separate business at the Art Museum. That's a whole separate contract. It's a whole separate deal. Do you know what I mean? So it's, we're not necessarily in the business of restauranting. You know what I mean? And so it's just, it's an interesting conversation that absolutely we continue to have.
You just said that a new F&B operator or contract has been let out. Lisa,
Sorry.
Yes, starting in the fall, Escobar is now running our bar until that time. We had an arrangement with another provider before COVID, and it was a very challenging time even finding anyone interested in running the concessions. It faces very unique challenges as a bar. Yeah. It's about a 20-minute opportunity.
And as
All 450.
At once, that's right.
and the F&B operator Escobar that's up there now, is their contract worded in such a way that they are available for shows? Are they only available for shows, or do they have the opportunity? And I'm not saying we're going to go to this is not any, but if there was après opportunity to do 10 tables of people and a person playing a guitar, would they be availed to that, or is it not possible right now?
At the moment, the contract is about when we have performances at the Wheeler, whether they're ours or rental clients. We would need to amend the contract, and of course, they would want to be assured that there was enough demand to make it profitable for them. For them, it is a bottom line conversation. They have no subsidy.
Okay. Yeah. All right, well, this conversation will go on then about activating the lobby. I saw Lisa taking some notes, so I think that she is just putting that on her own radar. Chip, did you have something you wanted to add there?
I agree with you. I think it's we did like summer sessions. That's what they called summer sessions, right? Before COVID. In the summertime, we'd have events up there. And I always thought it would be interesting to look into the concept of the bar being open even when there aren't events. And yeah, maybe it's a non-events in the main Wheeler Theater, but someone playing guitar or something like that, you don't get that anymore in this town.
True.
I agree with you. I mean, I go up there all the time, and I'm like, God, this is such a beautiful spot. Some of the best views in town, old historic building. I just would love the lobby to be activated, but I also understand the stress and strain that puts on overall operations, not necessarily the building. I think the building's in good shape. That lobby area was renovated, so it has the facility perhaps, but some other constraints. It sounds like we are all rowing in the same direction when it comes to the programming of the Wheeler, with one caveat, and I'll come back to that at the end, and that's something that Ziska brings up occasionally. As far as the subsidy level being appropriate, I think we're all looking and we are all understanding of the subsidy that might be required for the program that's desired. So we will continue to learn about whether the level is appropriate and what the appropriate level must be in order to achieve those goals. And then what we said about measuring success was kind of a blend. I think measuring success really comes with annual or biannual review, right? We can't just do it based on numbers of people or revenue. We can't just do it as a measure of that.
True.
So I think our to measure success, we need to figure out a metric that will come from review. It may be somewhat intangible at times, but we can get there.
Can I just add something to that? Because we've had this conversation a lot about, is it butts and seats and revenue, or is it experience? And even the redoing of creating the memories, the redoing of the, is it the mission for the Wheeler?
Vision.
The vision, okay. If one person has an experience that is life-changing in a, audience of 20, that's a success. Or if, for example, with CMC, Sopris Theater came and did their production of Dog in the Nighttime at the end of January. And I don't know
Dog in
how
the
the
Nighttime.
audiences were, because I missed it. I was out of town. Was it well-attended, Lisa? About 60 people. So, that I know from on stage is almost uncomfortable. It's so small. But those students are being able to experience a production on a huge, beautiful stage. The venue is also something to be measured. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the use of, and the offering of, and the availability of to our community for both educational purposes as well as, this Aspen Country Day School play, even just signing their name on the elevator. There's huge experiences that contribute to success and need to be also considered. And those are intangible, right? So it's not always butts and seats. It would just be my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Another thing to think about is ticket prices. We all know that entertainment and dining prices have gone up in this town. So how should the Wheeler fit in there? We generally try to keep our ticket prices relatively reasonable, and that's getting harder and harder to do, which means increased subsidy. But personally, I still think the Wheeler should continue to be, unfortunately, one of the last places that a family of 4 can go get entertainment for under $100 or $200.
Thank you. The board, did you have some input?
Yeah, I just agree that a measure of success is diversity. That means something that a small group can be more meaningful than a full group sometimes, and that if it makes, as I think Amy said, if it makes an impact on people. And I know when we had Paradise Paradox and Shining Mountain, that there wasn't a full event. The venue wasn't full, but the use of the lobby before and after for making connections, I think, is really valuable, and really appreciate that. But again, for me, it's diversity of programming, and I wonder, looking over towards our legal advice, if it's possible, to have discounted tickets for locals. Is there a way that we can do that without it running into equal protection or treating everybody the same?
I think that calls into question of maybe a few different issues.
Turn your mic on, please.
I think that calls into question a few legal issues. A lot of times, these contracts with the artists dictate sales prices and those kinds of things. So those are built into the artist's contract, and I don't know that they would always be willing to agree to a discounted ticket rate for a subset of individuals. There may be a way to do it legally. We would have to look at how we define a local for purposes of that. As you know, in our municipal code, we have various benefits for locals, and how they prove up their residency is dependent kind of upon the benefit that they're receiving. It's usually a registered voter type situation or something along those lines, but I think it's something we'd have to look at more closely and evaluate all the different questions that come with that.
Yeah, just a thought that if a group wants to have a set ticket price, that we could have a locals discount and then subsidize the delta, so that, locals that work their butt off, that keep this town going, oftentimes don't have the income, expendable income to be able to appreciate the venue, and some way to make it available to all, I think would increase the experience of the people in Aspen.
Board, are you asking to have subscriptions come back?
I'd like to, if the rest of council agrees with this, I would like to explore the possibilities of making subsidized or local discount within the confines or within the guardrails of what the different groups say and with what the law says, and how we could determine if it's a utility bill, if it's a driver's license, if it's voter registration, I don't know. But if there's interest here to have further discussion, I would support that.
I would say that this is something that Lisa is part of her job, and this is what she does. If you look at the tiered ticket pricing that we have used for some shows, it's very much geared so that there is that affordability. Now, does that create accessibility? I mean, if tickets sell, they sell, right? So maybe the conversation just needs to be reflected to Lisa to say, like, maybe there's an equity ticketing policy. Maybe it's not just around locals. Who knows? Maybe there's a scheme that we don't know about that we would like to empower Lisa to look into. The objectives around that: local access, affordability, and probably another word that starts with A that I just can't think of. But again, Lisa's taking notes, so I think she hears this discussion. I know that she thinks about this consciously on every show, because this is part of what she does. When you're planning a show at all, you are looking at what that revenue balance is. But maybe what we're asking for is, some kind of equity pricing around, or equity ticketing around locals or access. I don't know, but. Diane?
If you would, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Diane Foster, Assistant City Manager. It may be helpful to get a little more clarity from council and the Wheeler Board if they're interested in locals pricing. You currently have that for golf. And the reason I say that is that Lisa would need to do a lot of pro forma work to figure out, okay, if we want to maintain X% subsidy level, what would it look like if we were to create this different ticket pricing, as well as I did want to remind you for golf, the Golf Advisory Board has advised that it does include zip codes beyond Aspen, while at the Arc, there is some locals pricing that's a little bit more kind of local Aspen. Thank you.
Does the Wheeler have rush ticket sales?
Again, on that point, I would ask that staff be allowed to kind of look into this more, but I do wonder if it at all hinders the Wheelers' ability to find artists and work with artists to get them in, because sometimes they are very particular about how we price the ticket tiers. So I just, and I'm not as familiar with it as Lisa is, but I do think that that's something that we need to consider as well, beyond the whole, how do you even determine who a local is? I don't want it to hinder our ability to contract and work with the various artists that Lisa's been able to come to our event, get to come to our venue.
I think that the general policy is what we're talking about here at this table and in this meeting. We are talking about access and affordability with a nod towards locals. I think going forward, all we'd want to do is maybe learn from Lisa a little bit about her strategy. I mean, and who knows, maybe there's something that she would ask of us to say like, yeah, this would really help and I can go a long way, but I can't do it right now. So I would say maybe before we look for any direction, we'd want to learn from Lisa a little bit about what she's doing and what the current state is. So maybe an info-only memo, but maybe not even that extrapolated. Okay, I want to finish off number 2 with, something that Ziska brings up from time to time, or things like lost events like HBO, a comedy fest that they did. A lot of, depending on how long you've been here, a lot of the really large name acts that have come through the Wheeler Opera House have been private shows. For a long time, the Forestman Little group that came through town was putting everybody from Sugar Ray to the Eagles in the Wheeler. But there was no access. There was not. That was not locals. So yes, the Eagles played the Wheeler 10 years ago, but I personally watched it from the rafters in the attic because I was an employee of the Wheeler in the sound department, and we were even ushered away from that show. So my question to the board would be, in the pursuit of those big name acts, does the board support somewhat giving up control, or is that part of our formula? Do we like that? Does the board like the fact that it can be like, so-and-so played at the Wheeler even though, it was for a private group? How's the board feel? And I'll start with Ziska, since this kind of grew from some things that she said.
If I may. I think I just read in the paper that $400,000 was given to the X Games in order for them to put on their televised event.
Not by us, but more than that was given to them.
Yeah.
But not our part.
So that, and when you're talking about something which is broadcast, let's use that word, something which is broadcast, which would cover HBO and other past events. And it has become more prevalent now than it was 10 years ago, certainly more than 20 years ago. Producers are looking for subsidies from local agencies. That's what they're looking for. So it's all whether it pencils out with the producer. Whether or not they're public depends on the subsidy. If you stipulate that as part of the subsidy, that you have to have X number of local hires, that you have X number of events that are open to the general public, that you have to have a ticket tier basis. That's all part and part. If you have to have a green event where you are being a sustainable event, these are all things that you tag onto that subsidy. So that after all of those boxes have been checked, that's when, at the end of the event, and you get all those budgets back in your hands and staff reviews them, that's when they get their subsidy back of 20% or whatever it is. And this is what entices them to come to your venue to put on their show there. And the competition between locations, as I'm sure you're aware, is very stiff. It's very, very stiff. There are locations expos and film commissions and all sorts of quasi-government agencies or government agencies that are going fishing to have these events happen here. I mean, it's stuff like there's a bug at the end of whatever you're broadcasting that says made in Aspen or made in Atlanta or made in New York or all the rest of that sort of stuff. The mere fact that you have that many different productions that are happening all over the world with this formula tells you that it's economically successful. You know, so those are the things. You don't have to say it's an either or, because there are ways that have been worked out and that are fluid. It's not like it's set in stone and this is the way it's going to work forever. But there are ways in which this can be achieved so that everybody gets a little piece of the pie. And you also open it up to local audiences. And also, more importantly, from my point of view, local staff. Because I've been up in the rafters as much or more than you have. And that's how I see the stuff. And I know that has always been part of my contract for all of these events, is I get to be a real person in the audience. I have to put that in the contract.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to be shown the stage door.
So let me just bounce this off the rest of the board. The sentiments that are shared there. So yes, bigger shows, limited access is not necessarily a key issue there because of the accessibility, for example, broadcast. Is that I see some nodding, like, yeah, we understand that. Do you guys understand that? Or are you like, no, that's the wrong direction?
If a corporation or other entity like that wants to rent out the Wheeler several times a year to put on a private event that the public's not involved in, have at it. But I don't think that should be a regular thing. That doesn't help anyone in the community, really. I think, except for a headline, I think that the Wheeler should have 5 to 10 larger national acts or speakers or comedians, et cetera, every year. And I think that requires additional subsidy, and it requires additional money to do that, unless you want to have it $500 tickets, which I don't think the Wheeler should have. So I think there should be big name acts. I think there should be more of them, along with the existing program that we have. But I think that you have to realize that that's going to require a larger amount of subsidy from the city.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Amy?
As someone who also worked there for a long time in the lighting department, yeah, I got to see NXS and ELO from the rafters too, and then put everything back in the truck and go away. But yeah, the MCI, ESPN, Forceman Little, and all of those, back when we had those on a regular basis, the income used for those was used to subsidize things like 2 weeks of country day school. Now that there's such savings from the RET, I think there is less appetite for selling out the Wheeler to a closed private event, where back in that day, it was much more necessary to maintain the subsidy and maintain the goings-on. So big names, yes, I loved doing that. I think it was great doing James Taylor and Carole King. I was psyched about that, and I will love that day forever. But these days, the Wheeler has enough money to not need that income stream for events such as that. So yeah, should somebody approach the Wheeler and say, hey, we would love to rent you out for a couple days, I don't think that they should bump other things just for a private corporate, but if there's the opening for it, I don't see a reason not to do so.
The other thing is that we're lucky enough to live in a community that has a fantastic live music venue on the Belly Up that brings national acts here all the time. And I think that we should continue to work closely with the Belly Up in figuring out what acts are better for the Wheeler and what acts are better for the Belly Up, because I absolutely think that there are certain acts that are a great fit for the Belly Up, and there are certain acts that are great fit for the Wheeler, and usually they're different. And I think there should be more Belly Up acts that would probably be a better fit for the Wheeler playing at the Wheeler.
Okay, I appreciate it. That input indicates to me that there is an additional level that the board is interested in. Times have changed, but given that there is an additional level that the board is interested in. I want to move on to number 3 here. Thoughts on the Wheeler's role in the arts community. What does the Wheeler mean to the community? Council members, this is a question to us, for us. Does anybody have any personal opinion here?
Part of that ties into the last part of question number 4, the Wheeler first. Is the Wheeler within just the Wheeler walls, or do we take this Wheelerette and expand up and down the valley? It's hard to go up the valley, but down the valley.
Yes, no, we have expanded the uses outside of the Wheeler walls as it was traditionally considered. But again, just specific to thoughts on the Wheeler's role in the arts community. Sam, do you want to take a stab of how you see it?
I think it's already been said, so this is not a critique at all. It's an all-encompassing. One of the things that makes the Wheeler unique is that you do put on a wide variety of shows that all the other entities in town don't do. So I think that's what does make it special, is hosting Country Day and all the other small community partners. So keep doing what you're doing on that front.
Thank you. John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to mention Country Day School's yearly play they put on as well. And I remember Steve Skinner put on a rock opera there back in the day, Umbrella Man, that was amazing. And yeah, I'd love to see more events like that.
I guess what we're hearing is the Wheeler's role in the arts community. It is a performance venue and a gathering place for our community. So if I'm kind of getting the question correct here, I think we view the Wheeler's role as centrally that. It is not necessarily the Wheeler's role to be directing all of the arts and culture in the community, but rather to play its role, which is that of performance venue and community gathering and filling those niche performance needs. Secondarily on this question was, what does the Wheeler mean to the community? I think the Wheeler is one of 3 absolute touchstones that remind us of our history and our present, and in some way we know will play a role in our future. So I think the Wheeler means an awful lot to the community. But again, you know, and this will come up as we deal with some other questions, but there needs to me, there needs to be a certain amount of sovereignty to the Wheeler. It should not be all things to all people. It should not serve all masters in this community. It needs to be the Wheeler. Like I said, we'll touch on that a little bit more as we get down into some other questions.
Tori?
Yeah, go right ahead.
We, in the past few years, we've talked about an arts council with a Wheeler as being a member. I don't know if there is an arts council that gets together. I think some of the large MAA and some of the large performing venues do have some kind of get-together, but.
Is that group still meeting?
It's the, is mine on? It's the CEOs of the local arts organizations that meet, Daniel, once in a while. It's not a regular occurrence, but that's a possibility.
Yeah, and some of the smaller venues as well, and CoA has really come into its own, and to have maybe collaboration, cooperation between the different venues. But not, and at some point we were talking about the Wheeler being the moving force, but I just see the Wheeler as a member of a community like that.
Yeah, Dr. Kurt.
I'd like to comment in some 2 ways. First, I think the Wheeler has a kind of by tradition, a leadership role in the arts in the community. And I've encouraged the formation of a kind of a Wheeler intern or fellowship in the summer, which goes from the Wheeler to the Theater Aspen, the Belly Up, and other locations, and gets an experience at those locations as well as reports back to the Wheeler to get a kind of a liaison going, maybe a synergistic relation with other arts facilities. And second, going beyond the walls, I think includes the Wheeler lots next door. I'd like to see something happening there. A building was envisaged at one time, but even a kind of a temporary band shell, which other people could use, like during Food and Wine as part of the entrance, area to Food and Wine. And other people invited or book using that kind of an amphitheater for different kinds of community arts-related events. I'd like to see those lots on which the elevator shaft and the emergency exit now exist on those lots. Those lots, they really need to be used. They're a potential just empty spot now. It's just used for parking in the back.
Thank you. That'll come up in another question as well.
Mayor Tory?
Yep.
What are City Council's thoughts on the Wheeler producing or co-producing events outside of the four walls of the Wheeler?
Such as where?
Such as getting involved in events in Wagner Park, or co-producing events with the CoA, or we did a comedy week at one time where we were doing comedy shows all over town that the Wheeler was producing. during the comedy festival.
Right now, our conversation is around the public art plan. So that conversation hasn't really happened for us when it comes to the producer of such events, right? So the previous council that started the ball rolling on the public arts program was all for events in Wagner Park even and the like. If it's in conjunction with the Wheeler, I think that's great. We have not had that conversation around the Wheeler being the producing agent for those kinds of events.
Curious how the rest, how we feel about that, if we're invitational to having co-production of events.
Let me give you an example. At 4th of July, the Wheeler generally sits empty because the music festival uses it for the summer. And to me, it seems a little bit odd that the Wheeler, with all this money involved, doesn't have any sort of thing going on around the 4th of July. Now, we cannot do it in the theater during the 4th of July, but could we do something else?
I would think this is the perfect topic for you as a board to discuss, come together with your advisement, share that not just with us, but first with Lisa, and talk to her about those as possibilities. Capacity is always a question. Running a venue like the Wheeler Opera House is a full-time job, right? You're full-time, aren't you? Yeah, I thought so. And so if you're talking about taking on added production like that, there's a lot that goes into that. But that is I would think that would be an agenda item for you guys to discuss and scratch your heads together and go, hey, does this make sense?
I think there may be some confusion about what the word being a producer means. So in many cases, it's lending your name or just giving money.
And you guys can all talk about it.
So, I mean, let's.
Yeah, you guys could.
Because your perception of what that may mean will be different with every single item in many cases.
But that is something that council would be open to, because in past councils, that was a hard no.
No, we would be interested in hearing your opinion about it.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we would want some information from our director and the like.
Okay.
Technical detail, the ordinance, in conversations with the city attorney, the ordinance that was passed that accompanies the RET, actually, you cannot spend money outside of the four walls of the Wheeler.
Diane, when the Aspen Mountain film was done, Jim had a different opinion on that was relayed to us by Jenna at the time. So there needs to be more clarity with that, because things were going on in a Wheeler-produced event, which that was, but they were going on in the limelight and not inside the Wheeler, and they were still being produced by the Wheeler.
There were
So-
also events done down Valley, and that is specifically why that conversation happened with the city attorney about that. And,
Yeah.
and we can ask him to provide more information, but it actually precludes the use. It does allow for money to be spent on Wheeler operations, but not outside of the four walls of the Wheeler. Thank you.
And so if you guys as a board had that as a conversation and you were like, yeah, we think that there's a real role here, that would require change by ordinance and the like. So that's a conversation for you guys to start and then for us to follow up on. Thanks, Diane.
Just a word of caution, rats are if they get voted down, and they go away, you're not gonna get another one. So be careful treading on that.
Well, I think this is part of the communication thing that we've been talking about from the first item, is that we've seen the interpretation of the ordinance have different results and moved in different directions depending on different councils or different eras. So when you've got a sitting board that's been around longer than some of the councils have been around, Tom, thank you very much, that to have those maybe there just needs to be a more defined set of what the current interpretation of the ordinance is. Because as Tori said from the very beginning, the way that you read those ordinances can be interpreted differently depending on the present circumstances.
And we'll find out more information, and you guys should schedule it for an agenda item just to have conversation. It sounds like you guys are all kind of supportive, but I think you need to have more conversation. Number 4, thoughts on Wheeler's priority in regard to the real estate transfer tax. Should Wheeler first concept be codified? In this memo, Wheeler first is capitalized. Is it a thing?
No, it's our thing.
So,
You haven't seen the stickers around?
yeah, right.
Not yet.
So, for me, and I've always said this, I do believe that the Wheeler is priority in this, and it has it is earmarked, I do believe, with priority. Bless you.
Bless you.
I am interested in that as something that's codified. I don't know how it's codified, right? Because all we can come up with right now is we're like, hey, you know what? While we're on this new arts and cultural kind of plan, I've shared the same concern. Hey, I don't want to spend the Wheeler funds down to minimal reserve. I don't like that. At the same time, I'm also really not that big of a fan of saying, hey, let's just leave $20 million untouched. Because that doesn't really achieve anything for me either. So all I can say to this is, me personally, I do believe that the Wheeler is earmarked with priority in the real estate transfer tax. How to codify it, I don't know yet, but I share the same protectionism of the Wheeler as a lot of people do.
That's good. You want to run with this? You want me to?
Hold on, I want to find out from other council members. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, my belief on this is status quo, but more spending, honestly. I think we do have so much. When you talk about, like, ask for greater subsidies, the money's there. If you can, like, put on things that the community supports, I think that's easy money spent, especially since it's not just our overall general fund. This money is earmarked for exactly what it should be. And just the last comment on it, I do think we should put a tax, or the real estate transfer tax, on the ballot this upcoming election for renewal, since it expires in 2040, and we're going to need it for building of affordable housing projects as well. So just want that on your guys' radar, that could be coming up soon, something I support.
Ward.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Wheelerette, the last ballot language that was approved by the citizens, so I'd like to see that. And I know that the funds that were there prior to the new stream of funds were really absolutely limited to the four walls. And so there's a kitty there that can be used for within the Wheeler. But I'd just like to see the ballot language again before I can really opine on how we can do this. But it doesn't do any good with the rate of return that we get on investments for millions of dollars sitting in a fund and not doing anything. It gathers dust and depreciates. So I'd rather use the funds, but have a comfortable reserve. And we had some discussions about this, about the capital projects projected out for the next 10 or 20 years were, I think, over $10 million.
10 million plus.
Yeah. So to have those numbers before I can really go into more depth on this.
John?
Yeah, it's obvious to me that the Wheeler building itself should be the priority for the fund. I also agree with the rest of council that the fund is large and could possibly be spent in better ways. And I look forward to hearing about how we can codify that concept.
Then do you have a board consensus on that question?
I think that the board, we're the Wheeler Advisory Board, so we're going to vouch for the Wheeler first. The board recognizes that there are future expenses for the Wheeler that we don't know about, and that it's important to have a significant amount in the RET to cover that. And I think there's also a majority of the board feels that that the RET money going out to different arts organization is a very good thing outside of the Wheeler. There has been some concerns, though, that the language around the Arts and Culture Fund doesn't address the priority of the Wheeler being the first priority. That doesn't address Wheeler being the first priority as well as it should. And the concern is that City Council, this current City Council, believes that the Wheeler should be the first priority with that money, but 10 years from now, 20 years ago, that depending with a different City Council, they could feel differently, and that could change. And we'd like to have something a little more permanent that makes the Wheeler more of a priority.
And when you talk about the Wheeler like that, do you mean the physical building of the Wheeler? Do you mean the programming ongoing, right? There's different aspects to the Wheeler. So what is the majority of the board's concern there? The physical maintenance?
Obviously, physical first, right? The structure of this building lasting another 120 years. But also programming. The Wheeler being able to offer diverse programming for the entire community, which requires subsidy. And that's important too. That's something that should continue.
Have you guys in the last year, have you had at your board meeting the benefit of Pete Strecker or
Yes.
Diane kind of going over the finances and the fund and the way that it works and stuff?
Yeah, we had Pete Strecker actually at our last meeting. It was a fantastic meeting. He was very helpful going over all of it. Yeah, very useful. Our concern, like I said, just to summarize, is that
Solidify the language.
This council is Wheeler, believes in this Wheeler first concept, but how do we make it more permanent for future councils as well?
Right. Understood.
Jessica, you want to say anything?
Yeah,
Yes, that's definite.
if I may, then Tom. Pete's presentation was very informative, very worthwhile. And what that highlighted, I think, for all of us, was that although the pre-2021 funds are being viewed in one sense and the post-21 funds are being viewed in another sense, really the potential for this is that if you keep spending down the pre-2021 and you keep increasing the post-2021, that there aren't guardrails around the post-2021. So this council, future councils, future staff, future events, make whatever is in that secondary fund, which if real estate continues to go the way that it goes and the RET continues on, that will grow. One portion of this line item will grow and the other line item will go down. But there are guardrails around the pre-2021. There are no guardrails around the post-2021. And as much as you can say Wheeler first, I don't see that defined. And to reaffirm what Chip is saying, I don't see that defined anyplace. I don't see it in writing anyplace. I don't see it as anything that future councils can look at and say, oh, this is what they meant. This was their intent. And
I agree with Ziska and Chip completely. That really needs to be defined, carefully defined. In addition, I'm not interested in seeing a spend down of that 40 to 45 million unless we see something constructed on those lots next door, even taking employee housing into the top floors. You know, we need rehearsal rooms. The stage is the rehearsal room now. If the opera people would have a rehearsal room, if the events would have a rehearsal room. So don't necessarily spend down those funds unless something gets built next door.
Thank you.
On the
Diane, did you
lots.
want to add something?
I did, and thank you. And, I think the lockbox discussion is a good one, and it goes to this, and I misspoke. So I was correct when I said that the ordinance that accompanied the initial Wheeler RET did specifically say you cannot use this money outside the Wheeler. However, the new post-21 funds, councils has discretion to use those for whatever they want, and therefore, if the council allocated to the Wheeler, okay, here's money that is post-21 arts and culture RET dollars, the Wheeler could use those dollars, and the Wheeler can also use ticket revenues, as they did, for example, to provide a small support for the Palm Festival last year, Palm Tree Festival. So wanted to clean that one up. So pre-21, post-21, thanks.
Thank you. I've got good notes around that. We'll follow up. And, this is one of those topics that crosses the line a little bit. This is not really in your roles and responsibilities. However, as an advisory board, this is the kind of thing that we'd want to hear more from you, more detail. What does it look like? What are you really suggesting? Anyway, you could, as a board, you could have that conversation, but it is slightly out of responsibilities, except for the fact that they're pretty open-ended.
I hear what you're saying, but a lot of us were also involved in the campaigning and for this to get done, for this revision to the RET.
Yeah.
And we all had conversations with many, many people in the community, and they all said the very similar thing. So this is not just the board talking, this is the community talking. And I don't think that this is entirely complicated. It's just city council saying, for future city councils, the intent of this vote was for the Wheeler to be the priority.
That's not enough. There needs to be more to the description than that. That doesn't do it. But if that's along the lines of what makes you guys as a board happier, then that's what we'd want to hear. So,
just to jump in briefly is that, part of what we do is we go around, we ask community, we ask other performing arts organizations, and when I'm talking to other performing arts organizations, it is their view of that arts and culture fund, that it's not just going into the general fund, that it's still tagged for arts and culture.
Exactly.
And that is not what has been put in writing on anything that I've seen. Please correct me if I'm wrong and I just missed it. But, I'm going to give you a softer quote than the ones that I've been given, and that is, that's what we voted for, that's what we expect.
It is, I think it is delineated in the language around arts and cultural uses only. But I get it, I get the overall point, and I pretty much agree with you, so.
Just a comment on, Tom, your comment about rehearsal. And a few years ago, we were in discussions with Jazz Aspen Snowmass, going in partnership with the city about a venue across the street. And now with the Red Onion, having a performance venue somewhere in the future. If there are any conversations yet about the use of that venue for some of rehearsals or any uses.
All right, I want to keep moving on. We're taking a little bit longer on this item, but this is a great conversation. It's wonderful to meet with you guys. Thoughts on Wheeler staffing is the next one. Is the Wheeler staffed appropriately, and where does that staff live? Are there opportunities to help Wheeler staff with housing? Okay, first, I want to make sure that this question does not get off to the wrong topics here. Staffing and personnel are items that need to be discussed appropriately and in the right places at the right time. So we can limit this to kind of the questions that are in front of us. Is the Wheeler staffed appropriately? Well, what we have heard from our director is that staffing is a challenge at the Wheeler just like it is everywhere else. So is it staffed appropriately? Probably not. We're probably on the light side. In our memo, we have a breakdown of the staffing that is there. It's beyond this council to know operations and staffing numbers. However, things that came up through this, something that struck me, I'll say, is along with the 16 full-time staff members, it is noted in here that when we are doing certain productions, there are up to 5 production staff members whose work and hours vary depending on the level of programming and rental activity. Some may work 25 hours a week, and this is something that I want my fellow council members to hear, because it dovetails with the conversation that we've had recently around affordable housing and some of the requirements. Some may work 25 hours a week. Some may work 16 hours in a month. This goes to my point around the requirement of 1,500 hours for affordable housing. The professionals that you have working at the Wheeler Opera House that are production staff on hourly, for them to be available to work at the Wheeler for these sporadically scheduled shows and work hours is a difficult task. You're asking that somebody has other employment that they can continually say, yes, but not that day. That's what struck me from this memo. And so this is another one of those, if we want people to be able to work at the Wheeler Opera House, housing availability is something that they're gonna need. And yet the very constraints around working at the Wheeler Opera House make it so that you potentially do not even qualify. So that's a conundrum that we need to be aware of. As it goes back to the question that was put to us by the board, again, Wheeler staffing, what we've heard is that no, we are not necessarily always staffed appropriately or enough. Where does that staff live? Well, we could get a report from Lease if we wanted to on the staffers and where they actually live. Are there opportunities to help Wheeler staff with housing? Again, that would be something that perhaps this board, if it had this as a topic of concern as it relates to your role and responsibility, talking about daily operations and ongoing long-term Wheeler sustainability, you guys could have that conversation. You could share it with the executive director, who then will maybe have some opportunities or insights that she would bring to city council. We currently do not prioritize housing by job type. And if we did, I would be doubtful that we would start with prioritizing the Wheeler staff, no offense. But perhaps police and sanitation, streets, hospitals, schools, and the others would maybe come ahead of this. So, question number 5, I'm gonna open up to council members if you have any individual comments around staffing and staff housing. But I'm not sure we do.
Yeah, I would have to rely on the Wheeler board to help me fully understand how appropriately staffed they are. I'm assuming they're pretty close. And as far as where they live, we're all concerned with housing up here and doing the best we can to find homes for everyone who works in our UBG.
Yeah,
And then Ward?
yeah, the city has housing. Wheeler staff members are employees of the city, and I feel like they should be treated just like any other City of Aspen employee.
Ward, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from the Wheeler board as this being, a number one highest priority. If you're having a real problem finding housing for your staff, I'd like to hear about it. But I am in agreement with Tori that I don't want to go down the road of prioritizing what your job function is to give you higher priority for housing, because that's just, slippery road or icy road. It's just, what happens when somebody changes their job? So I that's something that I've resisted, and until I can be presented with overwhelming evidence that we have to give a higher priority to some people, some job functions, I'm going to resist that. And Sam does correctly identify 505 housing as being available to, within the restrictions on that housing fund. We're short of housing for City of Aspen employees, but that's an opportunity too. And Tori again mentions the number of hours, APSHA 1,500 hours, and discussions with the Western Mountain Housing Authority of 1,400, Vail being above 1,500, Snowmass being 1,400. And if we have some people that are working less than full time, are they working at another job that qualifies towards that 1,500 hours as it stands now? But I'd like to be better informed on what the needs are, retention and recruitment of staff.
Thanks, Ward. Chip, does the board have consensus thoughts or opinions on this question and topic? Amy?
One of my concerns with the staffing is it's not the people, and like you said, that some people are only called upon 16 hours a month. And to additionally address Councilman Rose's question or concern about the number and how grandiose the productions are, the people who are currently staffed are maxed out. So one of the big questions is, you can't have more and bigger shows without additional staff. But to get additional staff, you have to prove a consistent need to come before the city and council and approve another full-time or part-time employee. So it's a really difficult chicken and egg situation to approve hiring people if you can't justify them having a consistent job. Are there programs within the city? I know other departments share administrative people when other departments don't need a full-time administrator, but they both need part-times. Is the Wheeler partaking, or can they avail themselves of situations like that in other departments of the city that might help some of these 20-hour-a-week, on occasion, people fill out elsewhere to be available when we do have big shows come in like we just did, or when there are very busy months like December and January, so that they're available to the Wheeler to have more productions like we all would like to see. So that's my take on the question of staffing like that.
Thanks. I think for city council members, you know, we'd want to hear some input from the ED and hear that input. I guess we all have the same concerns, and Amy, I think you voiced it really well there, how they're, it's a confounded kind of predicament. So we'll get some more input from Lisa in the coming months along this topic. Is this good? Did you have input here?
Just an aside, I mean, what you're asking for is somebody that can function as a swing, which is an entertainment industry term. And that's somebody who can fulfill different roles as needed at that time. So it doesn't become a full-time employee in a, you're at this desk, this is your desk, this is going to be your desk for life. It's not. You've got to have that versatility to work in between the different departments. So that is a very specialized talent. And you may not be looking so much for permanent housing as you're looking to house somebody for those larger productions. You look at the number of crew that come in to do X Games and where they are housed and how they are housed. So you may be looking at something which is one spot that then houses different people at different times for different events. So you need to kind of think about housing as different in a very, you're dealing with nomads, basically, is what you're doing. So you got to have a place to pitch the tent and hook up the donkey and the camel and whatever it is. And you have to have parking, you have to have food, you have to have a bed.
Yep.
Showers are not necessary.
Showers and everything. Yeah, well.
Walk outside, pray for rain.
That made me think of, Amy, did we paint the stairwells together?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So talk about swing shifting and where we're needed, yes. When I was working there as a tech, we grabbed our hours doing whatever was necessary.
Reupholster.
Yeah.
Swingers.
Diane?
Just a point of clarification, just so the Wheeler Board knows that the city's 505 fund, which is this internal cities housings programs for its own employees, there is a priority for public safety and essential workers, so people who have to respond within a certain amount of time to serve so streets, utilities, but mainly public safety. Thanks.
Thank you. Thoughts on the Wheeler parcel? What should or shouldn't be done with it and when? Does the Wheeler Advisory Board have a consensus position on this?
We do not.
Okay. Council members, do you want to share your individual thoughts?
I think there was a study done a couple of years ago. I'd like to see that study again, that as I recall, the findings of that study was that there was not a need for a black box, but I'd like to see that study again, the results of that study. And there was a vote quite a few years ago about housing being put there, I think. Yeah, I'd like to see if the Wheeler Board comes up with some ideas.
Sam?
Yeah, my thought is do nothing until there's consensus among the Wheeler Board.
John, any input here?
Yeah, I really like Dr. Kurt's idea of getting something done there with the funds that are available, and if it had a housing component as part of it, slam dunk.
My personal thoughts, I'm not ready to move forward on the Wheeler parcel. I think that parking is valuable to the Wheeler Opera House and its operations. there were some stumbling blocks on the last proposal that was supposed to be over there, or that was proposed. I was somebody that worked on the, by the mother load, proposal years ago that, I regret did not pass, because I think that would have been a valuable asset no matter what. So I was disappointed with that, but at this time, I'm not really ready to move forward with any building on the Wheeler parcel until we do another look. I agree with Ward. I'd love to revisit what we've learned in the past. I'd love for this advisory board to have this conversation and jog this topic around a little bit before I really even opine more about it. I didn't, the last iteration that came through, I thought was maybe a 150-seat theater with an artist's residence upstairs and stuff like that. I get it. I think there's need, but it would be a longer process for me to really kind of weigh the pros and cons. I think the financing is probably not the biggest issue these days, but appropriateness probably is. I agree. So what we've heard today is like, hey, you know, housing alone, and that's either for artists or staff, I mean, would be a good thing. So I could be convinced, but right now I just don't have enough information to really see a direction there. And I agree with Ward that kind of what we saw so many years ago was not supportive of building that facility from a needs analysis.
I agree with you. I think the last analysis we did showed that there wasn't enough demand for that site, for that 150-seat theater. It's been a few years. Maybe we look at it again. I think that this is a important piece of property, and anything that's built there is going to cost a significant amount of money, so it really needs to be looked at carefully. That being said, I do think that we've had a big conversation about housing. We've had a big conversation about a big bucket of money.
Yeah, there might be some synergy there. Just real quickly to look around, it's a pocket park right now, right? It's a little small park. It's a half a block, if that, from a large park. There's another pocket park around the corner, Francis Whitaker. Just a straw poll. How are you guys all feeling about pocket parks like that? And not specifically this one, but specifically this one. You know, is it best as green open space where people squat their dogs and have a smoke? Because that's what's going on right now, pretty much. Do we like that? I mean, open space, open air, non-developed land has always been a valued asset for Aspen. So just real.
Yeah, real quick.
I know your answer already.
I'll answer real quick.
I know where you're coming from.
I was surprised to learn years ago I was surprised to learn that lot is the exact same footprint as the Wheeler. So it is a significant size lot. Personally, I don't think that, I think it's a completely underutilized asset in a fantastic location in the middle of town. And I think the way that it has been used is just not up to its highest and best use.
And to build on that, we have had multiple conversations about activations in that space of some sort in good weather, especially when the Wheeler is turned over to the music festival, to be able to do something outside, if it be small performances, if it be an outdoor rehearsal space for the music students, to be all kinds of things, just to have something that is visibly active, adjoining and adjacent to the Wheeler, since it is the Wheeler space. So even though it may not be a building as of yet, it is, as Chip said, a completely underutilized piece of the Wheeler. So just a picnic table and a place to, well, that guy doesn't tie up his horse anymore, but there are uses for a grassy knoll right next to a performing arts venue.
I can answer all of the above to keep you happy, because your predecessors, the Aspen City Council, bought those lots for the Wheeler. And they were paid for out of Wheeler funds for the Wheeler. And now we know we have the need for rehearsal rooms. We have the need for Wheeler housing. We have the need for parking. So I would like to propose that you could build a cantilever kind of process where you have the parking in the back and the second or third floors cantilevered above the parking, so you can preserve the parking. Those upper floors could be for housing, and the middle and lower floors be for the rehearsal rooms. So let's get something done, and then I'm going to be happy and I can retire.
I'm pro pocket parks, but also activated space, not necessarily just the random picnic table or two. You know, purposeful would be nice, especially downtown in that core. I think it's really special.
Ziska, what's your position always been on that parcel?
Oh, Lordy. Ward, to answer your question, when the theater projects report came out, the reason that the board was lukewarm about it is theater projects said you would have to use every penny of the rent to build something on it. So at that point in time, it was $35 million, and to spend $35 million on that, everything, seemed a bit over the top. Activated, that's the word. And how you activate it, and I'm sorry, but my mind keeps going to that entire corner is not activated. The park and the front windows of the Wheeler. And that's, you know, I'm going to digress. I'm just going to do that. I do something called the gondola poll. I got people for 20 minutes in the gondola. I said, have you seen something at the Wheeler Opera House? And I get, well, they don't have anything after 7:30 p.m. And I say, you're thinking of the ISIS. And unfortunately, that's prevalent. And, you know, I never know what's happening there. And really, to get that activated, to get people involved in it, I don't think it's just that pocket park. I don't think it's the front windows of the Wheeler. It's what happens when you just look on the opposite side of Popcorn Wagon and Wild Fig, and it's dark. And people do not see it as a space that is inviting. And that's the problem that needs to be solved. As a part, how do you do it? I don't think you can activate the pocket park or the rehearsal space or the ticket cell or whatever it is without marrying it to the front of the Wheeler and the entrance in to buy a ticket. It all goes together.
Thank you.
I mean, the Aspen Music Festival can always use rehearsal space. That's never going to be wasteful for us, so always in favor of that. And what Ziska's saying, I think, is really accurate, that how we use that outdoor space is really important. I mean, from our perspective, the music festival students love to busk. That's really something that it really adds to their experience. And so having that be an active corner and having that be a space where people are visiting is, you know, we're always interested in bringing our students out and about in the town, so.
Is the busking a requirement of the curriculum?
That'd be great.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not?
No, it's not.
I did too.
Oh, I've been lying to people for years.
No, they can opt in.
Neat. Well, we love it, so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a definite, wonderful part
have some
of the
outdoor
summer
opera.
experience in Aspen, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Under a bench.
Shannon?
I have no need for a pocket park. I'll go to a real park.
Sorry?
I have no need for a pocket park. I would love to see something happen there.
Okay,
Agree.
okay, thank you guys so much. Cool.
Tori, there's something that, I'd be number 7, that we in our last board interviews, heard the couple of people say that they thought the city government was a hindrance or a barrier to the functioning of the Wheeler. And I wanted to hear that expanded upon and how the city government is a hindrance or a barrier.
You're talking about, that was something that came up in our interviews with 2 board members?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember which board member or both said it?
Ziska and Nina.
All right, a couple minutes, guys. We're already almost on 2 hours on this topic, so.
Well, I think we've covered it, because we talked, what at least what I was talking about was the limitation on staffing. And, you know, in order for us to do more, the staffing levels needed to be upped, but that in the past, they had been restricted, or, you know, not.
Understood.
That the council was not in favor of. Additionally, staffing, they were in favor of doing less so that the staff wasn't burnt, that the current staff wasn't burnt out. That was the discussion. So it wasn't that this council was in a hindrance, just wanting to make sure that that was not still the case, I guess.
Right. Did you have a different sentiment there?
Well, no, I mean, I'll ditto to what Nina said. I'll say one thing that I think that the council might be able to help on that would relate back to the park and the front windows of the lobby, which, that's a lighting issue. That's an historic lighting issue, is what the board has been told over and over again. And what I hear from the community over and over again is, we don't know what's playing in the Wheeler. We don't know where it is. Oh, that's that black empty spot, you know, next to a pub.
Yeah.
So that if there's any way that we can make what's happening at the Wheeler more visible and enliven that corner,
Right.
and if that is a problem with ordinance or with historic appropriateness or whatever it is, and it can be done tastefully, it can be done historically, but we need to get more people actually walking in the door and buying a ticket there. And if it's just lighting that needs to change, please let us, you know, light a candle.
Okay.
We have a new lighting ordinance. I think we can squeeze in a little bit of luxes and looms.
Luxes and looms. Thank you. You guys, that is our agenda for tonight. I appreciate it. I feel like I took an extra hour of your time tonight, but it wasn't an extra because this was a great conversation. It's great to touch base with all of you guys. You are always able and encouraged to talk to any one of us. As far as it goes with board, we want to get this communication. We want you to know that you are heard. We want you to know that you are respected. And we want you to know that we see a role and work for you guys. You are not just spinning your wheels over there. You are the ones that oversee. You are our eyes and ears over there, because we are not. We do not do that. So thank you so much for your input and conversation this evening. Thank you for your service on this board. And we will have follow-up to this meeting. And we'll go forward with better communication and talking about some of the ideas that came up here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mike that pops. Do you just mind grabbing those 4 name tags? Bill, come on up. Our next item on our agenda is Aspen Public House lease modification discussion. And we have Bill here, who is the current owner and operator of the Aspen Public House. Bill, would you like to introduce this item and your request?
Yeah, basically, I would like to work towards a lease amendment that would just give me more discretion for lunch service, primarily weekday lunch service or exclusively weekday lunch service. And beyond that, kind of focused on specifically the shoulder seasons, and in a perfect world, ideally winter as well, where we just don't have the foot traffic to hit the amount of customers we need to make a break-even number for that lunch service. And specifically, it's like noon to 4 p.m. is kind of the focus, so.
So the entirety, let's start with current conditions. Current conditions, are you open for lunch on the weekends?
Yes. We are. Right now, so we're open 7 days a week. We open at 4 p.m. currently, Monday through Friday, and then we open at 11 a.m. Saturday, Sunday. And also, we do a late night service too. So in the lease, right now it says the hours are noon to 8 p.m. is what the lease language states on page 22. But we're frequently open till midnight and sometimes beyond midnight. And I think that's overlooked as far as its service in and of itself, that late night service. And as far as revenue goes, we do generate more revenue after 8 p.m. than we do before 4 p.m. When we have the numbers or when we are open for lunch, so.
The lease currently says that you are required to serve until 8 p.m.?
Correct, yeah, on page 22 of the lease, I can have the Exhibit C. It just says, so year 2 and beyond of the lease, because for year 1, we were open, we did breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week in an effort to establish if there's enough demand for being open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what that looks like, what the numbers are like, and to give us a good amount of data for a year's worth of service. So we did that for the first 365 days that we were open. And then year 2 and beyond, it says open noon to 8 p.m., 7 days per week, with full kitchen service from noon to 8 p.m. And then it has patio hours may not commence before 7 a.m. But it's that first sentence, open noon to 8 p.m., 7 days per week, that I'm trying to just get more flexibility with. And like in the document that I prepared for council, it's kind of my belief that the original intent of the lease was to have a locally owned, like independently, a truly locally owned independent space that's accessible for locals and that's open year round without any, without any extended closures. I know that's one of the big frustrations with the community is when restaurants disappear for 4 months out of the year in the shoulder seasons. And so we are definitely honoring that part of the intention of the lease. Like I'm certainly not asking for any allowance to be closed for seasonal purposes. Like I want to keeping public house open year round throughout the off season is just the lunch, trying to be open for lunch in the months of like October and November and the last half of April and May when there's nobody in town, locals included. Seemingly that's pushing us to like a perilous level of solvency, that it's harder and harder to dig ourselves out of that hole, so.
So the request, and sorry if I don't have it completely outlined for myself here, but the request is to not do lunch when? So
I was hoping to keep the language vague just for the sake of making it easier. Basically just saying that the owner could be open for lunch when it's financially viable, as proven by historical sales data. When I spoke with the Wheeler Advisory Board back in the fall, they requested that I go into detail about exactly when we'll be open for lunch and when we won't. And so moving forward in a perfect world, starting June 1st, we were open for lunch 7 days a week, which is what we did this past summer. All the way through the end of September, lunch and dinner 7 days a week. Once we get through the end of September, and that's when we start to really see not just a decline, but the lunch numbers plummet. And I have a table, a sales data table I'm happy to share with the council So starting in October, we'd like to just be able to not be held, like, we would like to be able to eliminate that lunch service. We still operate at a loss in October and November, but we're able to at least limit the bleeding if we don't have to be open for lunch when we only see sometimes like less than 10 people in the course of 4 hours. So that's, and then in the wintertime, the same, it's not, the losses aren't as significant trying to do lunch on the weekdays in the winter, but it's still not profitable by a significant margin. And I have theories about, you know, my just observations over the last 5 years about why that is the case. But
All right, so to be clear, what your request is to commit to June 1st through September 30th, 7 days a week, lunch and dinner. But then after September 30th, your discretion for October, November, till June. So from October to June, discretionary lunch service.
just for the weekday lunches.
All right, Sam, comments?
Just a couple questions. Bill, so would it be fair to say that under these lease terms, we're sort of forcing you to have an unprofitable business at certain times of the year? Or a losing business, whatever you want to call it?
There are, certainly there's difficulties in trying to stay within the bounds of everything that's in the lease. And that's kind of why I've kind of been forced to choose between, are we going to be able to remain financially sustainable, but we're outside of the bounds of the lease? Or if I was having to adhere to the lease, it's going to create a lot of uncertainty for the future moving forward. So that's, hopefully that answers the question, but yes.
Yeah. With that, this might be a difficult question, but I was wondering if you got what you're asking for, is there any local benefit to that as far as, I don't know, can you reduce your prices by like $1 each because you're not losing money on other times? And I'm not suggesting that, I'm just asking, that's just my example in my head.
The margins that I run are razor thin as is.
Yep.
You know, even with the newest restaurant that opened, Buck, and it seems like their concept is fantastic. Like the local lunch burger that's on our menu that people can order anytime, if anybody, it's still cheaper than their cheapest burger, to put it in perspective. So there's not, like, to quantify it, the profit margin at Public House has always been below 5%. So even when we're breaking or beyond break even, you know, less than 5 cents or less than the dollar is what actually ends up at the bottom line. So that just creates tension and not a lot of room for dropping prices.
And then my last question is, if you get your way, I just say it like that, who do you think does this hurt anyone, do you think? And who potentially benefits? Other businesses get to take your 20 customers a day, doesn't hurt you? Like, I'm just trying to say that this is win-win, or who's losing here? Yeah.
I don't think, we don't, if I had the demand for lunch, I'd be doing it.
Yeah.
So by us not doing lunch in the shoulder seasons in the winter, there aren't going to be people who I think are upset. And it depends, like in the shoulder season, I think when there is such limited demand for lunch and dinner and late night, it becomes more zero sum, where if there were 5 people that were going to come to my restaurant, they'd probably just go to Big Wrap or Grateful Deli instead. And those are the concepts that are much better positioned for grab and go and for lunch and have lower overhead and have built an entire reputation around it. So I don't think there is a loser in this scenario if we were to stop, if the lease were to be changed to allow us to operate the way we have been.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. That's all I got for now.
Ward, do you have questions?
Yeah, I don't know how to approach this. I want you to be profitable, but you were chosen to run this spot, and you had a pro forma, you had a business plan, and I want you to be profitable. I want it to be a benefit to the community. And I read the menu, or memo that you're not getting enough people in, but by reducing the lunchtime hours, what's the benefit to the community? I see the benefit for you is that it reduces your overhead, your costs, your payroll. It reduces all of that. But how does the community benefit from that? Because that's a community venue. That building is of great value to the community. And we chose you because we wanted you to be the new pub, to be a local place. It's not the place of this council to try to tweak your business plan, but I just wonder if you could, if it's possible to extend the nighttime hours to subsidize the daytime. I know that I stopped in there a couple of times after an event at the Wheeler, and the kitchen was closed. So if you tweaked or played with changing, extending the nighttime hours, you just said there's not a need or a demand for late night dining, but 8 o'clock seems pretty early to close the kitchen.
No, I'm sorry, that was a mistake. Our kitchen should be open till 10 p.m. every evening, and if you experienced otherwise, I apologize for that, and I'll address that with my staff. Just the lease itself says that I'm supposed to be open, it mandated to be open from noon to 8 p.m. That's the language in the lease, and I'm just trying to adjust that. We are frequently open, every day we're open beyond 8 p.m. And the kitchen, like I said, the kitchen should be open till 10 p.m. every evening, and with the bar remaining open later, serving tavern fare as required by the liquor laws. As for the community, I think a question, so when I signed up, when I put in my proposal for the public house almost 6 years ago at this point, the landscape was drastically different in Aspen. There were fewer restaurants in my segment, and there was an energy in town, and I thought that breakfast and lunch was going to be a smashing success, and I was wrong. I misjudged that. We also, 5 years ago, so my other considerations, like my base rent has gone up 33% over what I was paying in 2018. My kitchen labor, the market forces for kitchen labor have gone up 26% also since then. So the cost of operating during lunch has gone up. And in the document, I outline how even though our lease is below market rate, people like to use the term that the restaurant is subsidized, but the only thing that is subsidized is a sub-market rental rate for me. But that doesn't make the restaurant invulnerable to market forces that drive up labor costs and food costs. And in town, unfortunately, the trend with restaurants and it seems like there's no cap on how much people will charge for food at restaurants in town. And they can come in and they can drive up the market rate for line cooks, for example. And it puts me in a even more difficult position trying to offer affordable food. So, and to speak about if we were open or maybe the late night service could bail out lunch service, if my margins were more than 5%, I would think maybe that's possible. But with the net margins being where they are at, I don't really have any wiggle room to operate much below break even really any time of the year.
So I think the original lease was $49 a foot, and my Google search showed that the commercial rental leases downtown are $220 a foot now, and you said that yours has increased 33% in the last 6 years?
Sure. I'm not complaining about how much I'm paying in rent. I'm very grateful for the rate that I get through the city of Aspen. The argument that I'm trying to make is that the rent is, for a healthy restaurant, only makes up 7 to 10% of your gross sales as a percentage. Everything else, food cost, labor cost, energy cost, consumer trends in town, it's a level playing ground with every other restaurant in town. Steakhouse, D'Angelo's, Catch Steak, all those other restaurants that gross 10, 15 times as much as I do in a year, we're all paying the same amount for beef, and we're paying the same amount for line cooks. So I am doing, I think, a good job in managing the affordable aspect while still maintaining profitability for the restaurant. And like for dinner service, we're busy. We're very, very busy. I think we're frequently one of the busiest restaurants in town. But that doesn't really pick up even until 6 or 7 o'clock. So when we open at 4 p.m., there's usually a couple hours where it's relatively slow. Not much happens then. If that isn't any indication about when we are busy, and it's kind of polarized around that dinner service and late night. Weekends and holidays being exceptions, you know.
It seems if everything's gone up, that your prices need to go up as well, as much as I hate to say it. But, I mean, if your expenses, your rent's gone up 33, your labor 26, you're paying the same for line cooks as everybody else in town, and same for beef. Your food isn't discounted. That perhaps you have to look at raising your prices, or maybe, and I have to say that I hosted a dinner for Bariloche Sister Cities there, and we had a great time. The RGs had a fantastic time. It was a good time had by all, so I commend you on that. But it just, to try to make this work for you, it just seems like you have to raise your prices.
And it is, with the schedule that I've outlined, it's working. And I don't want to raise the prices. I'm not asking council to let me do that. I like remaining in our demographic. Like I enjoy operating in the competitive space that Public House operates in, because there are fewer competitors. And the last thing I want to do is to start competing with the restaurants that charge a lot more for their food. We have a good reputation. We have a good following. People enjoy the food, and like I said, everything's profitable. I'm just trying to address the weekday lunch for the off seasons, because that is where I see us headed to. And it might take a year, it might take 2 years for a restaurant to run completely out of money. But I can tell you, like, as far as a benefit to the city goes, I think to the community, I think it's more beneficial to have a business in the city-owned space that has a good reputation, that's affordable and locally serving, and financially sustainable. I'm never going to get rich owning the Public House, and that's fine with me. I love what I do, but I think it would be more catastrophic, or at least damaging for the city, if I were to have a business fail in that space. And then it goes back to the RFP process, and you're going to have other potential restaurant owners probably telling you the same thing I'm telling you now as far as lunch service goes, I think, with anyways, sorry to go on a tangent.
Yeah, it's just, Michola's going away next year. We've got a couple of new ones, but.
Thanks, Ward. John, any comments or questions at this time?
Yeah, I'm not sure where to begin. I wasn't on council when you submitted your RFP, but I read it this morning as part of my packet, and I should have had breakfast first because the corned beef hash sounded delicious. While reading it, it's breakfast, lunch, après, and late night were suggested things that would happen. Brunch every Saturday and Sunday, bar menu available till 1 a.m. Now, I understand how difficult, I like to think I understand how difficult it is to run a restaurant. My parents had one, and because of it, I decided I would never get involved in the restaurant industry. So I understand the hardships you're facing and dealing with COVID and everything, but I've got to tell you, that location is spectacular. And I struggle with understanding how Buck can be such a raging success in an underground space with no windows. And we're talking about reducing the hours that you're open. You know, I understand what you're saying, but I'm struggling with this dichotomy.
What I don't know, and I haven't been into Buck yet, but I would like to, I know Brad and I know Jordan, is Zane's, for example, can operate when there's less demand in town for lunch because they have one cook and one bartender. The public house, just our overhead is at a level that it's hard to trim to be able to serve lunch when there just isn't a demand for it. So, and I don't know, I know, like, I wish Brad and Jordan and those guys a lot of luck, but everyone's eager to do the lunch and dinner 7 days a week when they open. And like, I did that for years. Like, we were open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week up until the governor shut down the ski resort for COVID, and that was kind of the first time that we backed off of that schedule. And maybe, I don't know, I'm open to suggestions if it's, I don't know if it's my concept or not, but I think we do run a good concept, but I just struggle to reconcile the break even, and just the demand that we need for that.
I would love to see your business succeed. I'd like to see a ladies' night or an industry night. Have you tried either of those concepts that were mentioned in your RFP?
We have, yeah, we've done everything that I mentioned in the RFP. We've tried, and
I don't understand how it's not more of a lively bar than, I mean, from my perspective, Michola is a very similar space, street level more or less, lots of windows, and I don't understand how they can fill their place so frequently, and I live not far from the public house, and oftentimes when I go by there, it just seems very quiet.
well, I would disagree with you. The public house, I think, like I said, is one of the busier restaurants in town consistently in the evening. I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to make the case that we're not busy for dinner, typically 7 days a week. Even last night, Sunday nights, which is usually a slower night for us, we were still on a wait for a table for at least an hour and a half. Not that it took an hour and a half to get a table, but for a period of an hour and a half or 2 hours, if you came to the front door, there was at least you would wait at least 15 or 20 minutes for a table. That's been the trend. Also, we're still, last year was a record-breaking sales number for us. And it's the first year that we actually have broken the net break point to pay additional rents owed in 2023. So the business is growing, and I'm not concerned about the sustainability regarding like the busier times of the year, or the busier services. It's just everything that happens prior to 4 p.m. that is my concern, so.
Okay.
Chime in again real quick. That's okay.
Sure.
I guess one thing I just want to say about Buck is it hasn't been open in the off season yet. So I'd be curious how well it does then. And then I just wanted to add that on Google Maps you got pretty good reviews, and you got 435 reviews. So that's really nice to see. I guess you haven't spoken yet, but I just want to say my suggestion, I'd love to potentially see this as sort of like a pilot thing where you get to not do lunches in May, but we'll see how it goes, and then we'll see if there's backlash. But if nobody notices, that will be directly to your point that no one's there to go in anyway. So that's where my head is at. And sorry, you get your comments, but
Yeah, no
that's where I was thinking after hearing everyone.
Appreciate it. I have a couple problems with this. And it's really outside of your business specifically. But this is a city-owned facility, meaning it's community-owned facility. The expectations on this space were for locally serving. And what that means is in those off seasons, that means lunch service and stuff. So I personally, I can't support this request as the request sits right now, because I think that that's not accurately representing the community. I hear hesitation up here, but I also hear the desire to work, to make you successful, to work with you so that you are the one that's successful here. on the macro scale of this, I also have a concern here because shrinking your business, or hours of operation, I should say, may impact the revenue that the city gets. And so when we have a lease agreement with you for a certain amount of operation, and the base rent is set where it's set with an expectation, and I do think it's an expectation of getting to the overage payments of 8% of gross sales in excess of the year's break point, I see us as not fulfilling the expectations for this lease. Then when I look at other things like the square foot or the annual lease totals compared to what other folks are doing in this town, my inclination would actually be to charge you more to be open less, because market comparables are I think in essence 3 times perhaps what the base rate is here. I think this deserves a deeper conversation. I don't hear current support for bringing back the request as proposed. I do hear, and I think that not just from Sam, but I think there's other council members that are sympathetic or understanding about the off-season times and what we're coming up to. I would like to visit this in an executive session with council to discuss this further. I think that there are components of this that should not be discussed in an open meeting at this time. We have the opportunity to convene in an executive session next Tuesday, 1 week from tomorrow. So that would be my request, is that we schedule this for some council discussion in an executive session as it relates to lease and contract terms and negotiations.
I appreciate the suggestion. Great idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, Bill will be back for then, which would be nice to
Yeah.
have his input for
Absolutely.
this.
Mayor, is there any additional information you would need from Bill to prepare for that session?
Last question.
I would like to have that conversation with Diane around what is justifiable for a request for more information. I don't want to overstep any bounds, and I do not want to put our current owner-operator in any uncomfortable positions with any requests. So I would wait until our executive session for that. With that, sorry, there's no direction for you this evening, but we have your request. We will discuss it as it pertains to lease and contract negotiations, and then we'll get back with you with some alternatives and options.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, guys.
Probably see you at your place for a beer later, so.
I'll be there.
With that, that's our second item and our last agenda item for this evening's meeting. Thank you guys for watching. As always, thank you to GrassRoots. We do not have a regularly scheduled meeting for tomorrow, Tuesday, so we will be returning on next Monday. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Endora.